Glory to Jesus Christ, and welcome to this week's episode of God with Us Live. Every week, we're joined by men and women, monastics, clergy, and laity, exploring exciting and inspiring ways to live our Eastern Catholic faith today. Your host is Father Deacon Nick Medelsky, a husband, father, and deacon of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of St. Nicholas. And now, here's Father Deacon Nick.
Well, hello and welcome once again, God with Us Live listeners. Father Deacon Nick Medelsky, excited as always to be here with you to find out more about what's going on in our beautiful Eastern Catholic churches here at God with Us Live. One of the things we've been talking about lately in our episodes during the Great Fast are different opportunities to live out those pillars of the Great Fast, prayer, almsgiving, and of course fasting. Today we're going to focus on prayer again, and one of the common things for people to do during the Great Fast is to go on some sort of parish mission or retreat or some other kind of special talks and things like that to help really focus in on the importance of this season and to spend some time reflecting on ourselves and growing closer in our relationship with Christ. With modern technology, just like a lot of the things we do here at God With Us, there are a lot of exciting opportunities to make these sorts of opportunities available over the internet to people across the country and even around the world. And we're going to talk with somebody who's responsible for one of those opportunities today and talk about that opportunity as well and hopefully give you a chance to sign up and take advantage of that if it works in your schedule. So my guest today is Sophia Shchur, who's the president of the League of Ukrainian Catholics. Welcome to the show, Sophia.
Oh, thank you so much, Deacon Nick. Thank you for having me here today.
Would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm first and foremost a parishioner of St. Michael the Archangel Ukrainian Catholic Church in Yonkers. And there I serve as a trustee, and I work pretty closely with our pastor, Father Kirill Angelos, on various parish projects. I also serve as a member of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of Stanford Pastoral Council. And in between, I work full-time as a registered nurse in New York City.
Well, once again, thank you for coming on today. Obviously, as I mentioned, and as you mentioned, you're very involved with the League of Ukrainian Catholics. Could you tell us a little bit about what that organization is?
Sure. So the League has actually been around for a while. As a matter of fact, we celebrated our 90th anniversary last year. We began in 1933 in the windy city of Chicago. And as you might remember, that year was not that we were around, but the Ukrainians in their homeland were being forcibly starved. And this depraved act of attempting to eliminate the Ukrainian people, their cultural and spiritual identity, and this genocidal act is known as Holodomor. Although not much better, the USA was no happy place either. We were in the midst of the Great Depression and between two world wars. So new waves of Ukrainians were arriving in the US and in Canada to avoid this oppression and destruction at home, which in this day and age sounds chillingly familiar to our situation today. So at that time, the clergy and the laity of St. Nicholas Ukrainian Catholic Church in Chicago, which is now the present-day cathedral, they responded to this by to the needs of these new waves of Ukrainians by working to give them both spiritual solace and much needed support during these difficult times. And what was also going on in Ukraine was, in 1933, was the Youth for Christ gathering in Lviv. And this inspired the Ukrainian Catholic youth in Chicago into action, taking the opportunity to organize as the Ukrainian Catholic Youth League, which is now our present-day League of Ukrainian Catholics. So it was intended to provide religious and social activities as well as opportunities for welcoming new immigrants into the church community. And eventually the League spread out from Chicago. And currently we have chapters throughout the U.S., which is mostly in New York and New Jersey and in Pennsylvania.
And so, with such a long storied history, there's a lot of organizations that have been around, for a long time like that, and they've, especially in the modern day, some of these organizations have struggled to remain kind of relevant. But that's not the case with the League of Ukrainian Catholics. How has that league remained, relevant and still find a purpose in today's day and age? Even though the world looks a lot different than it did during the Great Depression here in the United States.
Yeah, so basically, our mission remains the same: support those in need and provide opportunities for spiritual growth to strengthen our love for God through our Ukrainian Catholic faith. So that is our baseline. And uh, we, meaning lay and clergy, because the League of Ukrainian Catholics is an organization of lay and clergy. It's not separate. We work together. We're actually an ecclesiastical organization. So we work together to accomplish this overall mission that was started back in 1933 by working together and keeping in mind that our ultimate mission is to serve God. So how did we remain relevant? Well, you may be familiar with some of the annual online spiritual retreats, which we'll be talking about later, but we've conducted those together with our Ukrainian Catholic bishops as well as our local clergy. And we've had an amazing reach with these retreats. So just the feedback that we're getting back from these retreats are telling us that we're staying relevant on a local level. So this is on a broader level, reaching out. But locally, we, again, continue in the footsteps of our founders, welcoming these new arrivals from Ukraine since the full-scale invasion 2 years ago. For instance, in our parish, St. Michael the Archangel in Yonkers, we opened Abraham's Tent, which is basically a spiritual model for hospitality. And with older immigrants helping new arrivals, we found ourselves in the same situation as we did in 1933. So this in turn led to formation of a new chapter with these new arrivals. And we actually opened up this chapter and called it Nova Ukraina. So they feel comfortable at home. They know that they have a place that they're that they can feel unified. They feel at home, both spiritually and culturally.
Yeah, and I really like what you mentioned there about immigrants who had come in previous waves of immigration being able to sort of return the favor, right? And be able to now welcome new waves of immigrants or at least refugees here to the US and provide them, a lot of the help that they received when they first came here or would have liked to receive, in some cases. That's just beautiful to see, and especially an organization that's been around long enough to have that sort of membership and have those sort of connections to make that connection between, the new waves of immigration or at least refugees and the older generations here in the United States who've been here for a while. That's really, I think, one of the advantages of an organization like the League to be able to connect those two pieces together, right? Connect those generations and those waves.
Yes.
So we've talked about the organization kind of in general up to this point. But if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit about your personal involvement, what it's been like, and how you first got involved, and then what how that involvement has changed over the years, I guess you could say.
Sure. I have to tell you, Deacon Nick, was nothing short of divine guidance. That's putting it in a nutshell. But basically, I met our national board spiritual director, Father Marian Protzdik, and out of all places, Rome, Italy. We both happened to be on the same trip, which was organized by our Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of Stanford, and it was for the rededication of Saint Sophia in Rome by our Patriarch Sophia Shchur. So I actually learned about the League of Ukrainian Catholics in Rome from Father Protzik, who's from Buffalo. So I hadn't really been, I think I was kind of in the periphery, at that time. But I got to know the people of the League through Father Protzik, and he introduced me to the Niagara Frontier Council, which is the biggest council that we have. And the people there are just like a good collection of souls. And that trip was very spiritually life-changing for me. It moved me from that periphery, where I was basically a casual observer, and it basically drew me into this circle of spiritual men and women. And from there, somehow, like I said, divine guidance, I was drawn into this pastoral planning committee of the eparchy, and I began planning programs. And this also gave me the opportunity to do some workshop presentations for the League's annual convention, and so the seed sprouted,
Well, wonderful. And we'll get to, as you mentioned, the seed sprouting and some of the fruits of that when we come back from a short break here. Once again, Father Deacon Nick here with you on God With Us Live. We're speaking with Sophia Shchur, the president of the League of Ukrainian Catholics, and we'll be right back.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Scenes with the Saints. Do you know which saint convinced a lion to become a monk? Saint Gerasimos was born to wealthy parents in Lycia in southern Asia Minor. Leaving behind his comfortable life at a young age, Gerasimos went to Egypt to live as a monk, but returned to his native Lycia briefly before eventually settling near the Jordan River in Palestine. There, he established a monastery known for its strict asceticism. On Saturdays and Sundays, the monks would gather together for worship, and on Sunday nights, they would gather root vegetables, bread, water, and palm branches before they headed back to the desert. Monday through Friday, the monks would live in solitude, devoting their time to prayer and handicrafts like basket weaving. The monks would sleep on mats on the ground, eat only dry bread and roots, and would not light a fire for cooking or warmth. Despite this life of solitude, one day, St. Gerasimos ran into a special visitor. While walking through the desert, St. Gerasimos heard the loud roars of a lion. As he came closer, Gerasimos realized the lion was in pain. Not wanting to see one of God's creatures suffering, and ignoring the danger that might come from getting close to the wounded carnivore, Gerasimos approached the lion, saw that one of his paws was bleeding, and pulled out a long sliver. Gerasimos bound up the lion's wounded foot and expected the lion to scamper back to his den. But to his surprise, the lion followed Gerasimos back to his cell. The next weekend, the other monks were shocked and not a little afraid to see a lion following behind their beloved abbot. However, they were even more astounded when they saw how gentle this formerly ferocious animal had become, and that the lion apparently decided to eat only the same humble fare, root vegetables and bread, as his brother monks. The lion was given a job, just like any other monk, to guard the monastery's donkey as it grazed near the river. One day, the lion fell asleep on duty, and a passing merchant stole the donkey. Looking everywhere for his charge, the lion eventually returned to the brethren with his head hung low. Assuming that the lion had succumbed to his nature and eaten the donkey, the monks imposed a penance on Brother Lion and had him fulfill the donkey's task of carrying the water jars to and from the river. A few months later, that same merchant was passing through with a stolen donkey in tow. Immediately recognizing the donkey, the lion let out such a loud roar that the merchant fled in fear, leaving the donkey and 3 camels behind. The lion then picked up the donkey's rope in his teeth and led him back to the monastery, as the 3 camels followed behind. The monks repented for rashly judging the lion, and Elder Gerasimus decided to give the lion a name, Jordanes, as a full-fledged member of their community. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scenes with the Saints. Join us again next time when we learn more about the lives of these holy men and women.
Well, welcome back, God with Us Live listeners. Father Deacon Nick Medelsky, once again excited to be here today with Sophia Shchur, the president of the League of Ukrainian Catholics. And we talked in the first half about, the importance of this organization, especially from its founding to even today, still being able to provide Ukrainian Catholics with assistance when they arrive here in the United States, as well as building up Ukrainian Catholics who are here already in the United States. And one of the ways that the organization does that is through spiritual opportunities. And one of the biggest, you might have seen news about it posted online, is the virtual retreat that the League of Ukrainian Catholics has been offering for a few years now. But wanted to ask, how did the idea for something like a virtual retreat come up in the first place?
So it was born out of necessity. So I took over as president at the start of 2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What a time.
Yes, exactly. Prior to 2020, our retreats were just as everywhere else, I'm sure, physical retreats in person, at a monastery or similar holy place, like, for instance, St. Mary's Villa, which is in Sloatsburg, New York, which is home of the Sister Servants of Mary Immaculate. So we had our usual retreat set for Great Lent of 2020. And then, of course, the pandemic changed all our plans, and it was clear that there was no more business as usual, at least for the foreseeable future. So the choice was to just wait it out, do nothing, or to do something. And I couldn't just sit there and wait for this to be over, because we had no idea when it was going to be over. No one could see the end at that time. And there's no doubt that the pandemic and all the other, that wasn't the only disturbance going on. Other disturbing events were going on that year, and they depleted us physically and spiritually. And so the question became, can we transform this chaos? Can we adapt so that we can not only survive it, but thrive it spiritually? And so in an unprecedented, I have to say, demonstration of unity, the League of Ukrainian Catholics, the Mothers in Prayer, and our Ukrainian Catholic bishops, we organized our first virtual retreat, which was called Transforming Calamity into Unity, Dignity, and Healing. And this indeed turned out to be a spiritual anchor. We had this amazing impact. People from all over the world joined. I think we counted 26 or 29 countries.
Wow.
It was, we did not expect it. We were floored. We were in awe, and we knew we tapped into a need felt by many. And what better way was it to spread? I mean, I was thinking nothing wrong with the physical retreats, but they were limited in the amount of people. So maybe we had 40 people for a retreat, but here we had hundreds. We had over 1,000 people at the time that were able to take part in it, and even afterwards to be able to view it. So the reach was beyond what we were expecting, and and what better way is it to spread the word of God? The love. What better way was it? I mean, I would just. It still amazes me now thinking about it. But with the ongoing cooperation of our bishops, which is key, we continue to organize these annual spiritual retreats because of that first one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that I always like to know about, and I think something people might not necessarily appreciate, as someone who's, maybe attended some of these events, especially they've become, since the pandemic, they've become very commonplace, right, to have these more virtual online events. But could you talk about kind of the logistics involved in putting together an event like this, especially the first time? Because as you mentioned, you're a registered nurse, so I'm sure you weren't exactly have a lot of free time on your hands when this was coming together. So, could you talk a bit about what it takes to put an event like this together?
Yeah, so that was a very calamitous time, but both personally, professionally, because I had to deal with. I was actually ready to retire that March, so my professional life and personal life got spiraled out of what my plan had been. So so I just had to make the best of it. But I did learn some things that spiraling taught me. Well, I had to learn real quick how to do virtual visits with my patients. Um, uh, and and that kind of, well, as the League of Ukrainian Catholics, all we really had was a Facebook page. So when we came up with this plan for this retreat, we needed a landing spot. We needed a home where we could place these programs, these videos, the talks, and all of that. And so I learned real quick how to create a website. So in the wee hours of the night, I was reading how to create a website, watching all sorts of YouTube videos and figuring out. And finally, I just said, okay, let's do it. And I just did it. And it's probably not the most professional of websites, but it was a good spot to start. Like everything, it needs a little polishing here and there, but it is it's become a place where you can actually go back to see the other retreats. So if you weren't able to take part in a retreat, or you want to revisit parts of the retreat, that's all there. And so that was the first logistic, was that. And then there's things like, identifying the relevant themes, something to convey a sense of unity, and, remembering what it is that you're trying to do, what is your goal. So the goal, and still is to keep this spiritual anchor, so that people feel like that things aren't spiraling out of their control. Basically, getting the bishops in the same place at the same time. That's a logistical challenge, So those were the challenges in a nutshell.
Well, yeah, and I can imagine that's one of the things, especially when we're so far flung and as busy as our bishops are and everything like that. I'm sure that was a big part of what needed to be lined up for the schedule. And that kind of leads us naturally kind of to my next question, which is, we've been talking kind of what the logistics are, what kind of the inspiration was, but obviously there's another virtual retreat coming up this year. Would you give our listeners a little idea of what it'll look like, what the schedule looks like, who will be speaking, those sorts of things?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So our next retreat is actually on March 24th. Which is happens to be Palm Sunday, I think, for the people using the Gregorian calendar. So that the other logistics is synchronizing the calendar so that you kind of have your the retreat
Right.
in both spaces, calendar wise. And that was the one time where, especially this year being 5 years, 5 weeks apart, that the theme for our Lenten retreat is a view from the cross, which was
Mm,
inspired by a painting by James Tissot,
mm,
where normally we're looking up to the cross as repentant sinners and looking, but this is taking a little bit of a, maybe more than a little bit of a different view of a Christ looking down, and what is Christ seeing? What is his view? What is he thinking? Um, from that perspective. So a little bit of a different theme and when it comes to the cross.
mm.
So we do have thank goodness, we have our Metropolitan Archbishop Boris Gudziak, who will be speaking about the first topic, which is death by crucifixion, which is basically a historical, cultural, and spiritual perspective of death by crucifixion. So, and that leads us into the cross paradox, and the paradox being suffering and sacrifice and salvation. Like, how could this thing mean both suffering and salvation? And that will be Bishop Paul Homnitsky from the Eparchy of Stamford.
Mm.
And going deeper into that is the theology of the hand. And, obviously when Christ was nailed to the cross, or when his hands were bound, if you think about your hands being bound, when you can't use your hands, so you can't do anything because your hands are tied, literally, figuratively, and but how can you still heal? How can you still heal? So the topic is theology of the hand, from gestures to healing. It's a closer look at the hands of Christ. And when I meet from gestures to healing is, sometimes when we look at our priests and deacons, or even our icons, and you see fingers from the priest in certain configurations, right?
Mm.
We don't all know what that means. I didn't know what it meant until I started looking into it. But, just taking it from a simplistic view, from what are these gestures meaning? What are they symbolizing?
Mm.
And taking it further into how the hands of Christ healed. And that will be Bishop Bogdan Danilo, who's the bishop from Eparchy of St. Josephat in Parma, Ohio. And then finally the title, which is Changing Our View. What did Christ see from the cross? And that will be Bishop Benedict Alexichuk from the Eparchy of Chicago, St. Nicholas Eparchy of Chicago. And then there'll be a time for reflection, for discussions with the bishops, which seems to be a favorite part of being able for the participants to open up and ask the bishop questions. And they are very accommodating and illuminating, I must say.
Absolutely. What a fantastic lineup. And as you mentioned, I think one of the really cool things is I've been to, some of these similar kind of virtual events, and it might be a recorded talk or something like that. But these are actually the bishops giving the talk and then there to kind of answer some questions and kind of things like that, which I think is a really cool feature of this retreat.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it is. It's a very cool feature.
For people listening who might be interested in registering for the retreat, I guess first, I should ask, if it doesn't work in your schedule to do the full day, is it possible to just attend part of it? And then how can people register?
Absolutely, yes. You can pop in on the retreat at any time, from the comfort of your home or from your friend's home. Um, so you can register if you just Google League of Ukrainian Catholics. You'll come upon our website or our Facebook page, and there'll be links there to register. The retreat is free, as are all our retreats. So we just like to know how many people are going to show up and where to send the link to. So you'll get a link when you register, which will be a Zoom link which will become active at the time of the retreat.
And that website, Google is probably the easiest way to find it, but also if you type in leagueofukrainiancatholics.org, that'll take you straight to the website. Once again, it's a free retreat. You get a chance to hear from all of the Ukrainian Catholic bishops here in the United States, which is really cool to have those guys together in one place, figuratively speaking, right? And to be able to learn from that wealth of the spiritual treasure we really have in our bishops here in the United States. And really kind of cool in a way. Sometimes we talk about how, at least I know I talk about how we're, a little scattered hither and yon, and we only have so many bishops and things like that. But I think it's cool in a way that you're able to hear from all of the Ukrainian Catholic bishops in the United States in one day, right? That is kind of one of the advantages, I guess.
And that is, for me, I think, the biggest, it's the biggest feature is that we can get them together, for the people, for their faithful. And what other opportunities would you have to do that? I can't think of any where you can meet them all in one place, except if you happen to be at a sabor somewhere,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I guess I should mention too, if you're listening and you're not Ukrainian Catholic, that's okay. We still love you, and you're you're still able to register and attend the retreat as well, right? It's not just limited to people.
Absolutely. You don't have to be a member of the League of Ukrainian Catholics. You don't have to be Ukrainian. You don't even really have to be Catholic. Just come with a healthy curiosity. Your spirit will bring you to the right place.
Well, fantastic. Once again, thank you so much, Sophia, for joining me today to talk to us about the League of Ukrainian Catholics. I know I've learned a lot, and also this great retreat. I hope a lot of people, a lot of our listeners, take the opportunity to sign up for this. Like we've been saying, what a unique opportunity.
I thank you so much, Deacon Nick, for giving me the opportunity to speak about the League of Ukrainian Catholics and to put our retreat out there. The more people that can benefit from it, the better it is. So thank you so very much.
And thank you for listening here today on God With Us Live. Always a pleasure to be with you to talk about wonderful things going on in our Eastern Catholic churches. Make sure to subscribe. I wanted to share news as well, if you haven't seen it yet, that our podcast is also available now on YouTube. That's one of the things Google Podcasts is shutting down, unfortunately. I really enjoyed using that app, but they're transitioning over to YouTube. So we've made those available on YouTube, and you're able to share episodes of our program as well as of Seasons of Grace, our seasonal devotional kind of reflection program. We're working through Father Jack Custer's book on the book of Genesis right now. That those are available on YouTube, so you can also share those links with people. If you go on YouTube and search for God With Us Online or God With Us Live, you will find our podcasts up there, and you can share those, listen to those on YouTube. I know some people enjoy doing that, or through the YouTube Music app. So just so you know, that is now a possibility. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in this week to hear more things about our beautiful Eastern Catholic churches. God bless.
us for this week's episode of God With Us Live. Make sure to tell a friend or two about us and subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to follow God With Us online on Facebook and Instagram for even more great content about the Eastern Catholic Churches. And don't forget to check out all of the other great Eastern Catholic podcasts at godwithusradio.org, where faith meets life. God With Us Live is a production of God With Us Radio, hosted, produced, and edited by Nick Modelski. Send us a message at info@godwithusradio.org.